Vodo-Siosk Baas, one of the great combat instructors of the old Jedi Order, and Qui-Gon Jinn, maverick Jedi swordmaster. Renowned servants of the light, yet instrumental in the rise of the most terrifying Darksiders of their respective eras. If these two noted figures in galactic history were to meet in single combat, who would win? Native to Kravos, the Kravaki evolved from shallow water crustaceans and were distinguished by their red exoskeletons and their 8 segmented tentacle limbs. As was typical for members of his species, Vodo-Siosk Baas used his upper 2 limbs as arms and the remaining 6 as legs, concealing them beneath his flowing Jedi robes so as to more closely resemble a traditional humanoid, a cultural response to widespread xenophobia. Though lacking for dexterity, the tentacles boasted a greater range of motion compared to human arms and legs, providing Baas with a significant advantage when grappling. Over 300 years old, Vodo Baas was elderly, yet despite his advanced age, it was never his body that failed him. In combat, Baas favored stalwart defensive postures, leveraging his physiological traits through his skillful handling of his weapon. Their original homeworld lost to time, humanity was the most widespread species in the galaxy, the baseline against which all others were judged. Qui-Gon Jinn was a typical human specimen, though highly impressive by typical standards. Standing at 6'4", he was powerfully built, his primary attribute being strength. Nearing age 60, he was starting to slow down, though his agility and dexterity remained considerable. By far Jinn's weakest attribute was stamina. He won't burn out immediately, but he can't hold down a war of attrition. In combat, Jinn leveraged his strength and dexterity to stagger and subvert his opponents, through both precise blade work and powerful physical combat techniques. Qui-Gon Jinn boasts superior physical strength, but this advantage is of little worth, as all of his typical tricks are practically useless. To put it bluntly, Vodo-Siosk Baas is a squid monster. His 6 tentacle legs make him virtually impossible to stagger, and his hardened exoskeleton allows him to shrug off Jinn's physical strikes. Furthermore, if Baas chose to respond in kind, Jinn would have his work cut out for him. Qui-Gon's only hope is skill with the lightsaber. Vodo-Siosk Baas was one of the greatest Jedi warriors of his day, and a renowned combat instructor. Training as an exotic weapons specialist, or Jedi weapon master, he was armed with a wooden quarterstaff, which he imbued with force energy, allowing it to parry lightsabers. When attacking, he wielded the weapon from one end like a polearm, leveraging the improved reach. When defending, he wielded the weapon from the center, leveraging the improved leverage. He followed up parries with immediate counters, favoring body shots, though he has made use of disarming strikes. Specifically noted for his blinding speed and efficiency, he had every movement down to a reflex action. Though never outright stated, based on the information provided, my belief is that Vodo Baas's fighting style functioned similarly to Darth Vader's. He used an active defense based around shunt blocks to break the opponent's momentum, capitalizing on the quarterstaff's greater leverage to dominate in the bind, which is how he staggers the opponent. Instead of enduring the opponent's assault, he brings it to a screeching halt. This specific approach would also explain Baas's weakness against dual sabers and double bladers. He can't take the time to bind up one blade without leaving himself vulnerable to the other, so he has no option except to endure the assault. and the dark side of a fighting style based around immediate reflexive movement is the reliance on rote response, hindering his ability to adapt to new tricks. A naturally talented lightsaber duelist, Qui-Gon Jinn was noted as one of the most able Jedi swordsmen of his day. Armed with a standard lightsaber, he specialized in the aggression form Ataru. However, he took many cues from his own teacher, the Makashi master Dooku, and heavily revised the form to better suit his needs. He scaled back the acrobatics, simplified the blade work, and beefed up the defensive component. Favoring grounded postures, he performed his movements with his entire body to generate maximum power, hammering opponents with both lightsaber strikes and physical combat. The resulting style closely resembled Gemso, but was much more comprehensive. Instead of simply blocking and countering, he would use the active blade manipulation techniques of Makashi to subvert the opponent, breaking their momentum and staggering them with shunt blocks and deflection parries. When attacking, he used similar blade manipulation techniques to open up the opponent's defenses. And even a simplified version of Ataru blade work still provides more attack options than Gemso. Jinn's style was proven effective both on the battlefield and in a lightsaber duel, with his main handicap being his lack of tactical foresight and planning. Instead, Qui-Gon favored opportunistic improvisation, which made him dangerously unpredictable, but left him relatively easy to lure and deceive. Furthermore, though he was able to adapt his style to combat the saber-staff, he demonstrated difficulty contending with dual blades. He can't bind up one blade without leaving himself open to the other. The first thing that I think needs to be discussed is the lethality of Vodo-Boss's Force-imbued quarterstaff. In the past, I've stated that the quarterstaff is of questionable lethality compared to the lightsaber. I was wrong. The comics depict Vodo-Boss using the staff to shatter stone, which means that if he struck someone with lethal intent, the damage would be devastating. Generally, Baas is more defensive, while Jinn is more aggressive, but they are quite similar, with many techniques in common. While I would rate Baas as the more skilled overall, his style and approach is pretty straightforward, and nothing that Jinn wouldn't be able to adapt to. This wouldn't be the first time that Jinn has been exposed to unconventional weaponry. As a result, this fight is decided by logistical factors, and this is where Baas's advantage really shines through. Even if I'm wrong about Baas using blade binding techniques to subvert the opponent's defenses, the extra leverage provided by the quarterstaff compromises Jinn's ability to use those techniques against him. That's not to say it's impossible to overcome a staff wielder in the bind, as we have examples of fighters achieving this, but it reduces the value of the techniques that I personally consider to be Jinn's greatest asset. If Baas chooses to use such techniques against Jinn, he has a significant advantage. And if he doesn't, he'd no doubt be able to dismantle Jinn's defenses with rapid attack chains, much as Darth Maul did on Naboo. Vodo-Siosk Baas trained as a Jedi Guardian, the Crusaders of the Jedi Order, and he displayed this heavy emphasis on martial arts in his primary ability, Force Weapon. By imbuing his wooden quarterstaff with Force energy, he effectively used it as a physical medium through which he could directly leverage his power in the Force into combat. Instead of merely integrating offensive Force powers into martial combat, he merged the two into one. When more conventional Force abilities were called for, Baas was a capable master. With telekinesis, he favored disarming opponents, though he could employ Force pushes and slams if necessary. For tactical support, he mastered battle meditation, as well as the inwardly directed variant, Battle Mind, which he used to maintain his own focus in combat. Likely his most powerful ability was Sever Force, which was exactly what it says on the tin, breaking a target's connection to the Force by surrounding them with a wall of light side energy. Qui-Gon Jinn also trained as a Jedi Guardian, but despite his exceptional skill with the lightsaber, his powers were more passive in nature. Rather than actively channel the power of the Force, he lived as an expression of its will, lowering his defenses and allowing it to flow through him without any interference from his conscious mind. He emphasized sense abilities, life detection, force detection, and various subtle telepathic powers. However, when the situation demanded it, Jinn was capable of stepping up as a combative force wielder, though his only notable ability in this area was telekinesis. His force pushes were powerful enough to scatter and destroy contingents of battle droids, and he was capable of overcoming the defensive barriers of baseline Jedi Knights. Unfortunately, he was hampered by the need to concentrate and gather his energies in advance. For both practical and spiritual reasons, Qui-Gon Jinn was significantly more inclined to rely purely on physical combat. The description of Sever Force in the Power of the Jedi Sourcebook reads as follows. You can block a Force user's access to the Force, preventing him from using Force skills or Force feats. Nomi Sunrider used this power against Ulic Qel-Droma in Tales of the Jedi. This power can only affect a character who has a number of dark side points equal to or greater than half his wisdom score. And that is confirmation of my long-standing belief that Sever Force can only be used against Darksiders, which means that this power would be of no use against Qui-Gon Jinn. Another factor to be addressed is the long-term viability of Force Weapon, as both of Vodo-Boss's major defeats were due to weapon failure. My initial belief was that the power was extremely labor-intensive and could only be reliably maintained in the short term. However, this would make the use of the ability unreasonable due to the sheer impracticality. Given that Boss's weapon only failed when he was being overwhelmed, I've since concluded that his ability to maintain it is instead based on his level of focus and concentration. When he's on the ball, he's golden, but if he gets distracted or overwhelmed, he falls apart. Overall, Vodo-Boss holds the advantage as a Force wielder, as he possesses both a broader skill set and a greater level of magnitude. That being said, neither combatant is comfortable using the Force in single combat, and so Force abilities are unlikely to come up. This battle will be decided by martial skill, not strength in the Force. With Force abilities off the table, there is nothing to offset Vodo-Siosk Baas's advantages as a physical combatant, his unusual weapon and non-human physiology allowing him to use all of the same tricks as Qui-Gon Jinn, only better. That being said, this battle would be no casual curb stomp, as Jinn's advanced skill would still make him a serious challenge for Baas. They would still contend on an equal level despite Jinn's disadvantages. In my mind, the best analog for a hypothetical battle between Vodo-Siosk Baas and Qui-Gon Jinn would be Jinn's final bout with Darth Maul on Naboo. As nuanced as Jinn's lightsaber skills are, they're not so far outside of convention that Baas wouldn't know how to deal with them. Qui-Gon's aggressive advance would allow him to initially gain ground, but he'd quickly find his momentum broken by Baas's probing counters. Once Baas unleashed his dedicated counter-offensive, he would dismantle Qui-Gon's defenses with the same clinical precision as Darth Maul. I declare Vodo-Siosk Baas the victor.